Hi there, and welcome to my channel and this video. This is going to be the first in the series of showcasing some of my previously painted acrylic paintings. And I'm going to be sharing my process, some of the rules that goes into painting, although there are many rules that can be helpful to follow as you develop as an artist. You don't always have to follow. In fact, many rules are meant to be broken. However, you do need to know and understand the rules before you can begin to do that. But one of the rules, for example, that I often break, or a rule, a practice, whatever you want to call it, most painters will start by creating the background. Usually some fade, especially if they're working with oils. They will do some sort of blending of colors to get like a light effect. In like landscape paintings or still images, that's the practice, that you start from the back with what's further back, and then you move your way forward, adding your subject of focus in the foreground at the end of the process. However, depending on what you're painting, for example, if you're making like a huge mural of several meters, for example, then all those layers of paint that go on the areas where something else is going to be covering it actually ends up being a waste of paint. And therefore, I've grown into the practice of painting around the subject, of like marking the areas of where I'm going to have things going on in the frame of the painting, and then sort of paint to the edge more or less, and then straighten it out as I, move from the background towards the foreground, or actually jump back and forth. But I'll show you in a moment as I go through the process of this painting. Let's begin talking about today's painting. This painting was commissioned by the client. He was here doing a course on side mount diving, and at the end of the course, on completion, as a token of his appreciation, he wanted to gift his instructor a unique present. And so he contacted me and commissioned the artwork he wanted me to do from a photo that he had taken of his instructor during one of their dives here. It was a very interesting project. I didn't have much time to complete the project because he was here on vacation, so there was a very tight deadline. It was created within a week. So this painting was created from a photo, and some artists will say you have to by hand transfer your proportions from the photo onto your canvas. I say, why waste extra time when you can do it much quicker by tracing the outline of your subject? And so, of course, I did that here with the diver, just tracing the outline and positioning him in the frame of the canvas so that I get those right, instead of having to spend time later on perfecting little imperfections that have occurred along the way. That is my personal opinion. I don't think there's anything wrong with tracing. Some people might disagree with me on that. That's fine. I think if we can maximize our process and get to the end result faster, then we're better off for it. So always when I begin a painting, I start by sketching out the main um, the main areas, the main subjects of interest. And like in this case, we sort of have the line between the rocks and the water with the water rays coming through. And then of course I've placed my, my diver in there. After getting my proportions in, I started painting in the rocks. So I did sort of, besides from placing the diver in there, then I went to the background with what is furthest away and getting all those textures. And that is a fun part of it, because as with nature, you can sort of like doodle a little bit. So it's like looking at the photo provided and going along, but not being rigid about it being 100% accurate, because it's more about the effect. So in my case, I follow my intuition. I follow where my heart wants to go, or where my joy, where it's joyful. So, and that's why I don't follow these rules of necessarily always starting from the background, or as you see in this frame, I go all of a sudden up to the sky and start working a bit there. I always just follow my intuition. What do I feel called to do now? And then I follow that, and usually it works out pretty well. But you, if you want to be painting yourself, you'll have to find your own process, of course. In my opinion, there are no right or wrong way. You can develop your own process, and when you do truly start to develop your own style, not just copying what others do, then something unique will happen, and you will notice that you can do something that's unique to you, and that nobody else can copy. Or, well, we all copy from each other, but in the end, when we do, once we have a style, we usually tend to like put it through that filtering, um, so that it just gets a little bit. Even if I was copying in the past, if I was copying Dali or Van Gogh, Vincent van Gogh paintings, there would still be like a little bit of a style to it that was mine, so it didn't become like a 100% copy. Um, is that important? I think, of course, unless that is your goal, to make very accurate copies of other people's work, I would rather you take it in and process it through your filtering, and thus adding your creativity to it. And by doing that, it becomes new, it becomes yours, even though you are stepping on those that, not stepping on, but you are continuing the work that those that came before created, like we all do in any line of work. We're all building on top of the foundation from those that came before. So once I had completed the rock formation in the background, and I was kind of happy with the three-dimensionality of it, with the shadows and the highlights, everything was way too contrasty for giving the effect of being underwater. So the next step is to start painting in the light rays, the light coming through the water, and then also in front of the rock formations. And first, there's some thin layers of bluish colors that would be diluted with water and then go across the area, so it would lighten the highlighted areas and it would diffuse the dark shadows a bit. And then the next step after that is adding some white, some pure white, but watered out, so there's still some transparency to the paint. And to really make that separation between the background rock formation and those light rays that go through the water in front of it to sort of tone down the areas to get that effect that you get when you're underwater, where sort of everything turns bluish and the shadows are sort of toned down. So once I've made that separation from the background and the light rays, which I would say is the middle ground, and then we have the diver as a he's a front ground figure. He's a focusing object, right? Of the he's the diver is sort of the hero or the protagonist of the story of this painting, right? Everything else is just like the setup and the atmosphere created around him. Anyway, so once I've made that separation of the rock formation in the background and the light in the front, I sort of, with very watered out blue, start to make rock formations, but way lighter, way thinner paint, so that it appears to be further away. And I keep working on that with layers, and then I draw back in some white to, so it's sort of like you are molding with, or sculpting, you're sculpting with the light colors and the dark colors, bringing out more distance and more three-dimensionality to the work. Okay, and then once I was happy with the two-tier layer of rock formations in the background, I started working more on the light rays, adding some bluish colors to that, and maybe adding a little bit more darkness and shadow to the rocks at the bottom part that are really close to the camera or the point of view. And just sort of fading out things and adding a little turquoise to give it this feel that we're in a cenote. So as I'm happy with both the fore and middle ground and the light rays coming in, as I've softened edges and made it more appearing as light, I start working on the very foreground, the diver, and there's not that much three-dimensionality to him because he's in front of like we'll call that a backdrop of light. It's very important to get the proportions right when you're working with a silhouette, because otherwise it breaks the illusion of this character. There isn't much to it really, because I'd already drawn in his outline, so it was like perfecting it, bringing some three-dimensionality into it, getting his hands, a skin color. So, and then once the diver was sort of in place, I felt like there was too much contrast, that we needed between the lights and the darkness, that we needed sort of a little bit of blurring out. It's okay to have some bright, but it was maybe a little too much. So I was back in there with some thinned out blues and turquoise to tone it down even more and give more of this translucent effect of the light rays going through the water. And then once the diver sort of had solidified himself there in the water, all that is left is to sign the image. So that's the end of this video tutorial on how to paint a side mount diver from a photo. I hope this tutorial was helpful, and I encourage you to start your own painting journey. It's very healing, and it's a wonderful way to listen to your soul within. As we speak about esoteric stuff on this channel as well. The art of painting, or creativity in general, such a soul healing and mind balancing practice to have. That's why I started this channel. I wanna share my knowledge. I wanna encourage others to start their creative journey, regardless if that is painting or writing or playing an instrument. Anything creative that you can do or you feel called to do is usually one of those things that makes life worth living. Those are the areas in which we get to still, as adults, be playful and follow our hearts. And I think that's very important for having a rich and fulfilled life. And of course, by rich, I don't mean monetary. I mean in experiences and joy and happiness and all of those good things. So this is the end of this video. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, subscribe, and comment if you want to support and help the channel.